Hi all, I have a few quick tips for grammar usage this week as you start your peer review. Part of why I like to go over some grammar here is just to help you get some more thoughts about self-editing, try to give you some of the major errors that I see across the board in all of my composition classes. The nice thing about having this in video format is that as you hit the different points of grammar in here, you can totally pause this video, go check your essay, at least check the first page, and then come back if you're feeling really good about the point of grammar. So here are some of my top grammar errors for English composition. The first thing I see people getting really confused about is apostrophe use. So apostrophes do two things. The first thing is they can show possession. So Will apostrophe S, Will's book, means the book that belongs to Will. Sarah's parakeet is going to be the parakeet that belongs to Sarah. Now, without the apostrophe, let's just go back to Will's book. Without the apostrophe, we've then multiplied Will. So instead of a book belonging to Will, we have 50 Wills. And then there's a book sitting there. And it's hard to know what to do with those, right? Just a bunch of Wills in a book. Now, if we do have a bunch of Wills and they're all sharing a book, we'll put the apostrophe after the S. So that'll be the book belonging to all these different Wills. So that apostrophe use, that possession, really does make a difference in the way that your sentence is understood. Now, the other thing an apostrophe can do is show the absence of letters when two words are contracted together. Again, this can be important for meaning. This use of an apostrophe has become less and less common the more people have gotten into doing things like social media, texting. The reason for that is we usually can tell the difference in intent. So if I write ILL in a sentence, you usually do know whether I mean that I'm sick, I'm ill, or whether I mean I will or I'll. Nonetheless, in formal written English, that distinction is very important. So remember that some words that are contractions, where that apostrophe replaces letters where two words have been scrunched together, without that apostrophe, you have different words. Ill is probably the most commonly recognized today. Can't can be a certain way of moving. It can also be a kind of dialect. And won't with the apostrophe becomes want without the apostrophe. And that's kind of an outdated way of saying that you have a habit. We were wont to walk in the park after tea. So first thing is apostrophes, check for them, edit for them. The other thing I like to mention here, even though I don't have a specific slide for it, is make sure that you capitalize I. That also, I think, falls into the category of an error that's come up more often since we started texting. But that capitalization of I is still relevant, it's still required for presenting yourself well as an academic writer. All right, next slide. Commonly confused with versus if. And this is actually a really weird one because it breaks that rule about possession that I just told you. So, ITS means belonging to it. You can really think about this in terms of a bunch of other pronouns that you're already familiar with. So, I think about this in connection to his, right? He is going to be the subject of a sentence. His will mean that something belongs to him, and then him itself is going to be the object of your sentence. It is a little easier. It's going to be it is the subject. It's like this will work the same way as his. We don't have an apostrophe, but it just changes form. And this is really, it's a spandrel, it's a leftover from a time when English was what's called an inflected or a declined language. And what that means is that the words would actually change form depending on the purpose they served in a sentence. If any of you have studied languages like German, Latin, Russian, those kinds of languages do this. The way that the word is put together is more important than its position in a sentence. So that's really why we have these weird things that change form like his and its. On the other hand, it apostrophe s follows that contraction rule from the previous slide. That means it is, we've lost the I and just squinched that S at the end of the word. So that one, I mean, like I said, I think the best way to remember it is to think of its and his as being similar. That's also a rule that sometimes just takes memorization. Now, I do have some cheap ways of thinking about the next one. There versus there versus there. This first one, they apostrophe re, tends to be the one that people usually get right. So most of the time we know they apostrophe re means they are, and that we're missing that a. The two that get really confusing often to people are the final two there and there. So for that middle one, that's going to be our possessive. It's going to be the word, and again, like it changes. That pronoun they changes based on its role in the sentence. So my probably cheapest mnemonic for you all semester is if you take that T off the front of that, it spells heir. The heir is the person who will eventually get the fortune or the kingdom, right? So anything that belongs to them right now will eventually belong to the heir. There. So I know that's really cheap. It's the best I can do to help you guys with remembering that one. The final one is going to be a place. And again, there with this one, if you drop the T, you'll see here. And that's the place form of here rather than the listening form of here. The here that's yonder is there. And in the same way, the way that you know how to spell the place that we don't know is with a W. It's where. W-H-E-R-E. As opposed to the stuff that you put on, the clothes you wear, right? Which is W-E-A-R. Okay, so those are my kind of cheap mnemonics for remembering these things. The next thing is kind of a big topic, and this is probably the hardest one to kind of build and work on as a writer. There are tons of resources out there. Definitely take some time with these if this is something you have a hard time with. There are two major errors in sentence structure that we'll get to in a minute. So I like to start just thinking about basic sentence structure. The first thing you should know about sentence structure is a sentence to be complete requires, at the very least, a subject and a main verb. So this might be something like the old reading books. Spot runs. Now, as you move beyond those basic reading books and become the people you are now, you've added a bunch of other stuff in. And that tends to be where sentence structure gets more complex. So sentences have two kinds of clauses, and that's a lot of the other stuff we add in. Kind of starts building into that. So an independent clause is the part of a sentence that makes sense alone because it contains the subject and the verb. So John is, that's our subject and verb, a student in this class. That's some of the other stuff that comes into the sentence. But it makes sense alone, right? John is a student in this class. The dependent clause, on the other hand, is usually the part that comes after a comma. It's the part of the sentence that needs to use the subject and or verb from the independent clause in order to be complete. So we might say something like, John is a student in this class and enjoys writing. Now, and enjoys writing all by itself doesn't make a ton of sense. I think about this kind of as a test for this being if you take that piece of sentence and say it to a random stranger on the street, aside from making them wonder why you're saying random things to them, will they be able to understand your meaning? So if I just walk up to someone on the street and says, and enjoys writing, they'll wonder who. They'll wonder what the context is. But if I walk up to them and say, John is a student in this class, they'll at least know what I'm trying to convey. They'll have all of the information they need. So think about that as you're editing. The two common problems in sentences are incomplete or fragmentary ideas and having too many clauses connected together. So incomplete or fragmentary ideas are kind of like that example in the last slide about and enjoys writing. We just don't have enough there to know what the entire idea is. I like to exaggerate this to what I call the overexcited sportscaster error. So if you listen to those really excited sportscasters reporting action, they might fall into this incomplete or fragmentary idea trap. They might start, yelling, running, the ball, on the field, score, right? We don't know who's doing what. We don't know what's happening with those things. If we're watching, we do. So, test for that. Too many independent clauses tends to be a less common error at this level of writing, at the college level. It still happens. I think about this as your kid just came home from kindergarten error. Y'all ready for this? So what this sounds like is, you wouldn't believe what happened today. First Mary said that we should go to lunch, and then we decided to go to lunch, so we did, but then John stole my lunch, but then Joseph said that he should give it back, and then the teacher said to come in, and then when the teacher said to come in, we had a nap, and then after that, we saw a pet. See how overwhelming that can be? What that is a whole bunch of independent clauses, a whole bunch of subjects and verbs and their associated stuff, all getting crammed together with no pause. So look for that also. Look for those multiple sentences being stuck together. Finally, I just wanted to do a quick where to put the comma plug. Comma should be used before the coordinating conjunction. That's the fanboys over off on the side. A comma can be used to attach a clause that elaborates on or describes an idea. That could be something like John, comma, a student in this class, comma, enjoys writing. So that's just that comma, a student in this class, adds more information. A comma can be used when inverting a sentence. So if I decide to write a sentence that's just kind of regular structure, it might be, we had a picnic because it was a nice day. The inverted version of this is, because it was a nice day, comma, we decided to take a picnic or have a picnic. So you can do that, and then the easiest one is probably the comma should be used in making a list. So I hope this was helpful. I know this is kind of a long video. Break it up, review it as needed, and I'll see you all on the discussion boards.